Welcome to Cross Search. I'm Jodie Papike. Today I wanted to give my top 3 tips to financial advisors that are exploring their broker-dealer or RIA options. And that is with regards to their pricing at a potential firm. The top tips that I have are really in line with number 1, an advisor really understanding their current compensation at the firm that they're with, or whether that's a broker-dealer or RIA. And what I always tell advisors is they would be really surprised that a lot of advisors, they know what their payout is, but when it gets to the really granular things like admin fees and hard costs, whether that be advisor costs or client fees, a lot of advisors aren't exactly sure what they're being charged by their current firm. One of the things that is really important to consider is that sometimes, or frequently, I should say, a lot of those fees are not fully disclosed to advisors. So for example, we've worked with many advisors that they pull their compensation statement and they can't really see any of the back-end fees that are being charged to them. One really good example of that are platform fees or admin fees being charged on advisory business. An advisor may pull a compensation statement that shows their gross dealer concessions, and the firm has taken out their fees before it goes to that statement. So it's really hard for advisors to know what their current charges are. But I always really encourage advisors to take a deep dive look at that before they start talking to potential firms. The second tip that I have for advisors is to talk about the economics in the relationship very early on. In conversations, preferably the first call that they have with a potential firm. And the reason why that's so important is firms are structured so different, especially RIAs, in the way that they charge advisors. So for example, some RIAs really force advisors to use their models and models for advisory platforms. And those models can tend to be pretty pricey. A lot of firms also will have a lot to offer advisors as far as resources and back-end services that they provide. But if an advisor is not interested or they don't need those services, their pricing may be just too expensive. So I always encourage advisors to not be shy about just asking a firm to lay out what their typical ranges are. And get an understanding of what all of the pricing or typical pricing is at those firms. You may not get to the exact number and know what your net compensation would be on the first call, obviously, but to address it early on in those conversations, just again, so you don't waste your time, is really, really important. And then my third tip is go way beyond payout. And what I mean by that is the payout is very easy to understand and talk about. There's typically a range that advisors will, find at a firm. But sometimes those payouts are extremely high compared to what the other pricing is. So 3 areas to go deeper into are the tech stack. Really explore what are the hard costs of the technology that's available, what's included in that tech stack, and then try to pretty early on in those conversations understand, is that tech stack going to satisfy all of your needs? Or are you going to need to add on supplemental technology that could be pretty expensive that you need to factor into your compensation? The third thing to drill into is, I mentioned it before, but it's the platform or admin fee that the firm is going to be charging. Some firms come up with that fee based on your total assets under management, while others will calculate that based on your account sizes or even your household sizing. So it may be a little bit difficult to figure out what that fee is going to be, but you can pretty quickly start to understand whether those fees are going to align and be something that you're comfortable with. This is an area that we see makes a tremendous amount of difference in an advisor's overall net compensation. We've been working with a team recently, for example, that their current firm is charging 20 basis points for that platform fee. And a good example of a firm we're showing them, that fee is going to be reduced down to 5 basis points. So it's an area away from payout that can really impact your overall compensation. And then the last thing to consider and to dive into beyond payout is your hard costs. And that would be everything from your E&O to any compliance fees, to any ancillary fees that is going to be charged to you, the advisor, or even getting an understanding of what are the fees that are going to be charged to your clients. I will say, and this is really important to consider, recruiters at individual firms typically do not come out and tell you what all of those ancillary fees are going to be until pretty far into those conversations. So very quickly in dialogue with these firms, I encourage advisors to get a list of all of the hard costs and all of the ancillary fees, and make sure you explain you want to understand what your clients are going to be charged as well. Another really good example of how this can be really different firm to firm is advisors assume that if there's no sort of ticky-tack ancillary fees charged their clients at their current firm, they can't even imagine what some fees can be at other firms. And we've seen everything from low account minimum fees to directly held mutual fund and variable annuity account fees. And those sometimes are just simply made up by the firm. They're, again, kind of in the background, and you wouldn't know about them unless you asked about them from the beginning. So these are our top 3 tips for advisors exploring their options. Obviously, there's a lot to discover and unpack in this topic. So if you have any questions or you want to explore your options, give us a confidential call today. We'd love to chat with you.